Sir. Good morning, good morning, good morning. For convening has arrived. Senate will come to order. At this time, I will ask all unauthorized personnel to exit the chamber. Chair recognizes the distinguished senator from Newnan, Georgia, the senator from 28th.
Good morning, Mr. President. I trust you had a wonderful weekend. And I know I sure did. Got a couple interesting things that have happened on this day in Georgia history that I'd like to talk about. On this day in 1901, the Georgia State Legislature, us, approved the creation of the Georgia Normal and Industrial College, which you might wonder what that is, but I know that it later became the Georgia College and State University. And also on this day in 1973, Georgia Congressman Andrew Young was appointed as the first African-American ambassador to the United Nations by President Jimmy Carter. Great days in Georgia history. Another great day is today, and we've got our lineup of pages standing here in the back with us. We've got Ava Rampersad from Marietta. We've got Kevin Burley from Roswell. And we've got Katie Yu from Duluth. So y'all give our pages a big round of applause. We appreciate y'all taking time from school to be with us today and look forward to working with you. Mr. President, the journal has been read and found to be correct.
All right, thank you, Senator. Is there objection to the dispensing of the reading of the journal? The chair hears none. The reading of the journal is dispensed with. Is there objection to the confirmation of the journal? The chair hears none, and the journal is confirmed. All senators who have bills and resolutions to introduce, please bring them to the Secretary's desk. First reading and references of Senate bills and resolutions. Mr. Secretary.
Senate Bill 354 by Senator Walker of the 20th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 10 of Title 43 of the OCGA relating to cosmetologists and barbers so as to exempt them from licensure persons.
Regulated industries.
Senate Bill 355 by Senators Robertson of the 29th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Article 1 of Chapter 2 of Title 21 of the OCGA relating
Ethics.
to Senate Bill 356 by Senator James of the 31st and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 3 of Title 44 of the OCGA relating to
Judiciary.
Senate Bill 357 by Senator James of the 35th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Titles 31, 33, 43, and 35 of the OCGA relating
Health and Human Services.
Senate Bill 358 by Senators Burns of the 23rd and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Subpart 1 of Part 1 of Article 2 of Chapter 2 of Title 21 of the OCGA relating to the State Election Board so as to remove the Secretary of State from the board to authorize
Ethics.
Senate Bill 359 by Senator Robertson, Senator Albers of the 56th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Code Section 1416.3 of the OCGA relating to definitions under the Georgia
Judiciary.
RICO. Senate Bill 360 by Senator Hickman of the 4th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Code Section 2260 of the OCGA relating to capital outlay funds.
Education and Youth.
That completes the order, Mr. President.
First reading of House bills and resolutions. The Secretary will read communications from the Governor requesting Senate confirmation of his appointments to the Judicial Qualifications Commission.
Dear Secretary Cook, the appointment included below requires Senate confirmation. This appointment is submitted pursuant to Senate Rules 3-3.1 ex sequentia. If we can provide you with any additional information to assist your office in the confirmation process, please let us know. Executive Order 06-13-2301 regarding the reappointment of the Honorable Bob Barr of Cobb County as a member of the Judicial Qualifications Commission for a term of office ending June 30th, 2027. Thank you for your assistance. Sincerely, Brian Kemp. That completes the order, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Pursuant to the Rule 33.1, the appointment is referred to the Committee on Assignments. Secretary will read reports of standing committee.
Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Rules has had under consideration the following legislation and has instructed me to report the same back to the Senate with the following recommendation: that Senate Bill 151 do pass, Senate Resolution 122 do pass, Senate Resolution 323 do pass by substitute, Senate Resolution 344 do pass by substitute. Respectfully submitted, Senator Burns of the 28th District Chairman.
It is now time for the morning roll call. Right after this.
Mr. President, the Senate Committee on State and Local Governmental Operations has had under consideration the following legislation and has instructed me to report the same back to the Senate with the following recommendation: that Senate Bill 338 do pass. Additionally, dear Secretary Cook, please accept this letter as timely notice of my intention to file a minority report for Senate Bill 338, which the Senate Committee on State and Local Government passed out of committee on Friday, January 12th, 2024. Thank you. Gloria Butler. That completes the order, Mr. President.
Secretary will read resolutions for a second time.
Senate Bill 205 by Senator Williams of the 25th and others, funeral directors and embalmers, reinstatement of lapsed funeral directors license, change provisions. That completes the order, Mr. President.
Now it's time for the morning roll call. Are there any motions to excuse? Recognize the senator from the 33rd.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good morning, y'all. I ask for unanimous consent to excuse the senators from the 35th, 38th, and 40th for business outside the Capitol.
Without objection, senators from the 35th, 38th, and 40th are excused. Are there any other motions to excuse? Hearing none.
We got it.
Recognize the senator from the 23rd.
I request unanimous consent to excuse the senator from the 32nd for business outside the Capitol.
Without objection, senator from the 32nd is excused. Recognize the senator from the 33rd again.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask unanimous consent to excuse the senator from the 34th for business outside the Capitol.
Without objection, senator from the 34th is excused. Any other motions to excuse? All right, without objection, Secretary will call the roll. Senators, please signify your presence by voting the yea switch. Secretary will unlock the machines. It is now time for our morning devotion. All senators, please take your seats and cease all conversation. I would ask that the doorkeepers secure the chamber at this time. It's my pleasure to recognize the good senator from the 33rd, District of the purpose of leading us in our pledge and introducing our chaplain of the day. Senator?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Now the Georgia flag. I pledge allegiance to the Georgia flag, to the principles for which it stands, wisdom, justice, moderation, and courage. Thank you, Mr. President, my fellow senators, colleagues, friends, and y'all. I'm here to introduce the pastor of the day, James Woodall, who currently serves as a public policy associate of the Southern Center for Human Rights and is the former state president of the Georgia NAACP. He chairs the Georgia Multi-Faith Initiative to End Mass Incarceration, an effort founded by the Reverend Dr. Raphael Warnock in 2019. He is also the co-author alongside Dr. Mark Ellingson of the new book, which looks at how evolution and faith challenge racial adultery. He is an alumnus of the Southern University and has a Bachelor of Arts in Political Science. And he also has a degree from Morehouse School of Religion at the Interdenominational Theological Center. That's where he got his Master's of Divinity. James also served as an intelligence analyst for the United States Army for 8 years. He has been named to Georgia Southern's 40 Under 40, and Alumnus of the Year in 2020, was named the 2021 and 2022 Atlanta 500 leader by Atlanta Magazine. James is a fellow of the second class of the Civil Society Fellowship, a partnership of ADL and the Aspen Institute, and a member of the Aspen Global Leadership Network. He is the proud husband of Brooke Harrison and the proud father of James Deuce Woodall II, and he's a good standing reverend at Pleasant Grove Missionary Baptist Church in Marietta, Georgia. And now I introduce to you our pastor of the day, Reverend James Woodall.
Good morning to the Lieutenant Governor, to Senator Rhett, to the members of the Georgia State Senate. I bring you greetings on behalf of my senior pastor, the Reverend Dr. Sammy J. Dow. And the scripture for this morning will be found in Numbers chapter 6, verses 22 through 27. And for the benefit of brevity, I won't read them, but I would ask that you reflect over them later today. For just a few moments, I would like to speak from the subject, blessings for the journey. I want to take this moment to pour into your life as you go about your various ways. You see, a journey is when you are traveling from one place or one season to another. And as we live, we find that our journeys often lead us through streams of joy and waves of success, but also they can bring tides of darkness and pain. You see, don't just take my word for it, though. We live in a day where the children of Israel were in the wilderness of Sinai, and God would speak to Moses, instructing him to speak a blessing over them as they would be reminded of God's hand over them amid such chaos. The scripture reads like this: "The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord makes his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace." You see, that word that caught me in that text was bless. You see, that word blessed is a greeting that is often found amidst our daily interactions. Anytime somebody sneezes, what do we say? Bless you. This act, this word of blessing, is one of wishing God's favor and goodness upon others, and even upon yourself. God uses this very kind of declaration to let his people know that they, as well as for us this morning, are blessed. You see, if that word blessed doesn't transform the very world that you are living in, whether it is you personally or the community around you, I would question whether it's a blessing at all. You see, Walter Brueggemann describes this confirmation as a reorientation by the word of God. He says the real God is the one who can invert life from terror to boldness, from sorrow to joy. That transformative power jeopardizes all gestures of equilibrium in our idolatrous images of God as the great stabilizer of the status quo. You see, God calls for us to love and to care for people, because how can we love Jesus, whom we have never seen, yet disparage and walk over people whom we see every single day? You see this blessing of confirmation and reorientation, but also we have in the text a blessing of preservation. The verse says, the Lord bless you and keep you. You see this word of keeping, that God being a sustainer. Remember who's writing this. He's been written by Moses, and it's to be passed down to Aaron, and Aaron is to say these words over the congregation of Israel. The Lord bless you and keep you. Not only listening to that, the one who is writing it and pronouncing it, but also it's important to know the ones who receive it, that they would understand that the Lord blesses and keeps. They would go back to the blessing of Isaac and Jacob. I will bless you to do all heaven and all the vegetation of the earth, in the agriculture, in the wine, and I will bless those that bless you and curse those that curse you. The Lord blesses and keeps. And so we go from the confirmation of the word to the reorientation and preservation of the word. But now we get to the illumination. The Lord would speak to Moses and said, the Lord make his face shine upon you. Don't miss this. It is the Lord who causes the Lord's face to shine. I imagine Moses at this point in God's declaration that he recalls a part of Exodus 34. He was reflecting on what he has written about when he would come down from the mountaintop, and that the skin on his face was shining with light because he had come face to face with God. And we had came down, the people would start to bow and worship God because they saw God in Moses. Here's a question I ask that you investigate today. When was the last time you left this chamber, went into a restaurant, or went onto your job after the session ended, and people wanted to know whose God you served because they said that you started to look like God's self? Our faith pushes us past our present situations to promote us towards a promise that allows for us to see the higher calling and to press towards a mark that allows for us to shine all around us every day and every night. And I get excited just thinking about the Lord's face shining upon me. And so the scripture says, I will give you peace. As I close, I'm reminded that peace in the Old Testament means completeness, soundness, well-being of the total person. This peace of God is given and confirmed, or in the traditional Jewish language, they use shalom. You see, this is beautiful because we believe in the possibility of the impossible. We are being urged this morning to keep holding on to a faith that assures us that God is still in control. Because we are in a place where people don't believe of a blessing of a God who keeps and a God who shines and a God who gives peace. But the reality is that there is a word for them who don't believe, and a word for us here today too. I don't know what I'm going to face all week long, or in my house, or on my job, or at my child's school, or even on the street when we leave. But I know I need the Lord to bless me. I know I need the Lord to keep me. I know that whether the ethical issues of our country and our community will ever be resolved, or what will come of the injustices of this world, but then I think about the grace of God. When I can't sleep at night and when trouble is on every side, I just simply pray, God, grant me peace. I need peace, a peace that surpasses all understanding. And so as I close for the last time, I want to profess that you are indeed blessed. Your journeys are blessed, not because you are a state legislator or because wherever you are finding yourself in the world, but because that wherever you are, God is also. And so as we move forward in the next seasons and the next days ahead, I ask that you simply walk in that light, to know that God is with you and that God has promised to bless and to keep you and to shine in and through you, and most importantly, to give you peace. May we pray. The God of our weary years, the God of our silent tears, the God who has brought us this far along the way, we simply pause this morning to say thank you. Thank you for your wonderful grace. Thank you for your matchless love. Thank you for your marvelous patience. We know that whenever you call men and women to declare your word, you run the risk of putting treasure into earthen vessels. But God, we know that you put it there so that the excellency of your power might be of thee and not of us. So show yourself excellent again. We love you. We honor you, for it's in the name of all things divine, and most importantly, in the name of sweet baby Jesus. We say it done, and it is so. In the name of Jesus we do pray, and we all said together, amen.
It is always a pleasure to introduce our doctors of the day, and we've got a good one here with us today. And I'd like to call on the senator from the 48th or 46 to introduce the doctor of the day.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My honor to introduce my friend, Dr. Rustin McAllister, Doctor of Emergency Medicine from Oconee County, Georgia. His kids have gone to school with mine, raised our children all together through the school system there in Oconee County. He graduated from Gainesville High School back in 1978. Then he attended the University of Georgia, graduated in 1983, and went to medical school at the University of South Carolina in Charleston, graduating there in 1985. We actually graduated in 89. Did an internship at Greenville Memorial Hospital, worked in their emergency room for a couple of years there. Then he moved to Jackson, Mississippi, where he finished his emergency medicine residency, then settled down in Watkinsville, Georgia, where he has been a very valuable member of our community, a very esteemed and a wonderful doctor. So it's my pleasure to introduce you to my friend, Dr. Rustin McAllister. Doc.
Thank y'all for letting me come today. I hope that you don't need me today, but you're welcome to make a social call. And if you do need me, I'm there. Thank y'all so much.
We have some special guests here today. I ask the secretary to read the resolution.
Senate Resolution 449 by Senator Estevez of the 6th. A resolution recognizing and commending the Atlanta Vibe professional women's indoor volleyball team and for other purposes. Whereas the Atlanta Vibe is Atlanta's premier professional women's indoor volleyball team and a founding member of the Pro Volleyball Federation. And now, therefore, be it resolved by the Senate that the members of this body recognize and commend the Atlanta Vibe professional women's indoor volleyball team for contributing to the city's monumental and professional sports landscape and providing a platform for world-class women's indoor volleyball athletes. That completes the order, Mr. President.
Is there objection to the adoption of the resolution? Chair hears none. The resolution is adopted. I'd like to recognize the senator from the 6th District, fine senator from Buckhead, to introduce our special guest today.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, colleagues. It is my honor for the very first special presentation of this session to be in recognition of an organization that is making history across this region and across this state. The Atlanta Vibe professional women's indoor volleyball team is making their debut here in Atlanta on February 1st. And it is the first women's indoor volleyball team in Georgia, in Atlanta. And if y'all don't know, women's volleyball is the #1 sport for girls in the United States. And they recently broke a world record by having an impressive 92,000 attendees in Omaha in a match that occurred just a few months ago. The Atlanta Vibe made its first official introduction to the city on August 4th, 2023 in Atlantic Station. I was honored to be there to attend. And the decision to bring this team to Atlanta was rooted in a desire to contribute to the region's monumental professional sports landscape and to provide a platform for world-class women's indoor volleyball athletics. Ms. Colleen Craig, a prominent businesswoman and founder and managing partner of Rally Sports Management, emerged as the visionary leader and the franchise's first ever team owner, and most importantly, she's a constituent. Colleen and her team have done a great job of bringing this exciting team to Metro Atlanta. While they are called the Atlanta Vibe, they will be playing their matches in Gwinnett County, so it has a reach across the metro area. And we look forward to this team bringing state championships, or bringing to the state some championships, but not only that, but contributing to the development of the game here in Georgia and to inspiring more people to play this great sport of volleyball. With that, I'd like to welcome Colleen Craig and Teresa Wenzel up here to the podium.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Estevez, Lieutenant Governor, and members of this chamber. I'm sure some of you knew that fact that volleyball was the #1 team sport, but I bet you if you raised your hand, almost everyone out here has touched a volleyball at some point. Might have been gym class, might have been a company picnic, but almost all of us has touched this sport at some point in their career. It has been chosen by the female athletes as the #1 team sport, in #1 or #2 team sport in the country in high school in 42 of 50 states. And up until now, we've not had a platform for them to showcase their skills. We talk about inclusion, we talk about creating platforms, and now we have the opportunity to do it. These athletes now will be salaried. They will be making $60,000 a year so they can live on that wage, which is the first time that's being provided. There are 7 cities in this inaugural season. As we mentioned, we have our home opener on February 1st, and it will be nationally broadcast. So we're really leaning into this, and we hope you guys continue to support us in that way. And what you did today was not just validate a resolution. This is actually making history. We don't have other support networks, so we are relying on the community to step forth for us as a sport, as a female-driven sport. So thank you for that. This is creating an ecosystem. If many of you have children, family members out there that have played volleyball, you've been down to Georgia World Congress Center during Big South, you've seen the ecosystem, the economic drivers this brings, and the sponsorships this brings. So again, thank you for that. The Vibe, if you want to know, you mentioned, the Vibe comes from an outreach program we did, and it was a suggestion from the community. And what the Vibe means is the intersection of fashion, sports, entertainment, and culture. So you bring your vibe to the game, we're going to bring ours. That defines Atlanta. So we are really leaning into that and appreciate that. I know there's some girl dads out there that are not sure what to do with this sport, or when their daughter chose volleyball. Now you have a path and a platform for them to look up to, and the girl moms out there as well. So thank you again for having us here. We appreciate it, and we hope to see you February 1st. And please feel free to reach out at any time. Thank you.
Are there any unanimous consents? Does any senator wish to rise on a point of personal privilege? I recognize the senator from the 28th for a point of personal privilege.
Thank you, Mr. President. Today I rise on a point of personal privilege. I want to welcome the Georgia Speech Language Pathologist and Georgia Academy of Audiology to the Senate today and to the legislature. These speech pathologists and audiologists work statewide to help individuals with hearing, speech, swallowing disorders, and balance disorders to live a better quality of life. And as someone who's been diagnosed with Barrett's esophagus and having swallowing issues, and someone who's also had an occasional balance disorder, maybe I might have had one on Friday on my birthday, certainly appreciate their great work. They're in the gallery today. If y'all please give them a warm Senate welcome. We appreciate all y'all do and look forward to meeting with you throughout the day. So thank y'all for being here.
Recognize the senator from the 21st for a point of personal privilege.
Thank you, Mr. President. Fellow senators, I come before you today to discuss what I'm calling prosecution for personal profit. I'm going to say that one more time. Prosecution for personal profit. Every member of this Senate body should be deeply troubled by the actions of the Fulton County District Attorney and the stain it has put on Fulton County and the state of Georgia. Let's look at the facts surrounding Fonnie Willis and Nathan Wade. One, Mr. Wade has never prosecuted a felony case, yet Ms. Willis calls him a legal superstar. Poor judgment. Two, Mr. Wade files for divorce the day after he was hired by Ms. Willis. Three, there are accusations of a romantic relationship between Ms. Willis and Mr. Wade. Four, Mr. Wade has been paid $654,000 thus far in the case. Mrs. Willis was siphoning money to her romantic partner for them to take lavish trips to Napa Valley, Miami, a Caribbean cruise, and many other trips and fine dining dinners. All of these trips were made before any of the indictments, and she should have disclosed she was taking these trips with Mr. Wade, her romantic partner, quid pro quo. Number five, in court filings in Mr. Wade's divorce case, the public has been made aware of credit card transactions that show the expenses of the trips I just spoke of between Mr. Wade and Ms. Willis. Fellow senators, I submitted a request this morning to the Inspector General Nigel Lange to investigate if there were any state funds involved in these lavish trips. I believe that Ms. Willis has lost the trust and confidence from the public to continue in this case. I believe at the very least she should be disqualified from the case. And I really now believe, with the scheme of prosecution for personal profit coming to light, that all of these cases should be dismissed. I believe by being in the relationship with Mr. Wade and not disclosing this relationship to the grand jury, it has resulted in fraud against the court and fraud against the taxpayers of Georgia. In closing, Ms. Willis, do the right thing and dismiss all charges and save Fulton County, the state of Georgia, and you and Mr. Wade any more embarrassment because of your poor judgment. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the well.
Recognize the senator from the 9th for a point of personal privilege.
They will jump in a heartbeat. Opportunity is all about opportunity. Thank you, Mr. President. I rise today on the anniversary of Roe v. Wade, and I rise to speak for the women of Georgia. I speak for the women of color whose voices have been silenced and disregarded by so many generations of legislators before me, whose paths in life have been dictated by circumstances out of their control. I rise for the 4 out of 5 black mothers in Georgia who are the breadwinners and cornerstones of their families. I speak for women who need their employers to stay here and do business in the state of Georgia so they can keep providing for themselves and the people they love, and for the employers that need the empowered and diverse workforce that make Georgia the best state to do business in. The more we restrict reproductive freedom, the more we tell women we don't trust them to make decisions and plans for their own families. Instead of treating women like adults, politicians here at the Gold Dome think that they should make medical decisions for us, as if we're not capable of good judgment. Beyond harming the physical and mental well-being of Georgia's women's choice restrictions, it devastates women's economic opportunity. The denial of a woman's reproductive freedom has far too long and far too often become a denial of her right to work and her right to determine her life's direction. According to the Institute for Women's Policy and Research, there is a direct correlation between denying access to abortion and women, particularly women of color, transitioning from a state of economic stability to living in poverty. Denial of access results in a lower high school graduation rates, lower employment rates, and lower wages for women in the workforce over time. Working class women of Georgia, who serve as the cornerstone in many of our Georgia families and in our businesses, simply cannot afford these types of restrictions. I rise to say that the 2.5 million women in Georgia of childbearing age in their families, I rise to say, to the 2.5 million women in Georgia of childbearing age and their families, I trust you to make the right decisions for yourselves and your families. Our Democrats in our caucus trust you, and we want to give you the freedom to make your own reproductive decisions. Everyone should trust you because you know what freedoms you need better than the 33 politicians in this body. Last week, Governor Kemp said he believes our state is moving in the right direction because we trust our citizens more than we trust the government. Despite the governor's words, it is clear that the majority does not trust the working class women in Georgia to make their own decisions. They certainly don't trust you on reproductive freedom, and they never trusted you to organize and demand a fair wage and the benefits you deserve. 1 year ago today, Leader Butler introduced SR 136, which puts Georgians' right to reproductive freedom, including the right to abortion, in the Constitution. It lets Georgians, not politicians, decide at the ballot box the freedoms they should have. It puts that trust in the Georgia Constitution. But the majority doesn't want Georgians voting on reproductive freedom. They've seen all the states that protected abortion's right at the ballot box. They know they're out of step with Georgians and the rest of the country on the issue. So 1 year ago, they put SR 136 in committee and left it there. No hearing, no vote. Why? Because we don't trust Georgians and Georgia women to make decisions. Women in Georgia, Democrats are with you. We're always with you on this issue. We know that you understand what you need far better than any of us in this body. SR 136 puts that trust in our Constitution and guarantees that forced birth on working class women is not an option. So for all Georgia's women, I urge my colleagues to support SR 136. It's time to trust Georgia's working class. Let's let the people of Georgia, not the politicians, decide. Mr. President, I yield the will.
Thank you, Senator. I recognize the senator from the 39th for appointed personal privilege. Senator from the 39th. Senator from the 39th. I see her.
I'm doing too many things. Good morning. Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, well, it is always a good day to celebrate the 900,000 Georgians in long-term recovery and honor those lost to opioid and fentanyl poisoning. Last Thursday, over 1,100 individuals gathered at the Capitol for the 16th Addiction Recovery Awareness Day, also known as ARAD. This event signifies both hope and solidarity in the fight against addiction. I want to congratulate Larissa Guerrero, Jeff Breedlove, the Georgia Council for Recovery, and all ARAD partners for orchestrating such an impactful day. We witnessed people from every corner of Georgia uniting to support peer-led recovery, to stand with survivors of addiction, and to honor the memories of those lost to this devastating disease. It's a poignant reminder that those suffering from addiction, whether it's drugs or alcohol, are not bad people. They are our family, friends, co-workers, and neighbors afflicted by a serious but manageable disease. As a co-chair of Georgia's Working Group on Addiction and Recovery, I'm proud that here in Georgia, we've made considerable progress in recent years. We've empowered the Behavioral Health Reform and Innovation Commission. We've expanded funding for recovery community organizations and addiction recovery support centers, and even brought the Georgia Recovers license plate into law. These strides, including the historic 3 Georgia Recovers campaigns and the transformative HB 1013 law, are testaments to our commitment. A special acknowledgement should go to our certified peer specialists, over 1,000 strong in Georgia, who embody the power of recovery. They are pivotal in expanding our peer-led recovery workforce, ensuring accessible medical care and support for all. Our recovery community organizations and addiction recovery support centers, funded by this General Assembly, are life-saving, family-restoring, and community-strengthening institutions. I'd like to also highlight the pioneering peer-led neonatal intensive care unit at Northeast Georgia Medical Center, a shining example of state and local partnerships supporting whole family recovery. Mark your calendars for the 2nd annual Georgia Recovers bus tour in September, announced by Commissioner Kevin Tanner in partnership with the Georgia Council for Recovery, which is set for September. This tour will further unite stakeholders, dismantle stigma, and demonstrate that recovery is real. In closing, let's remember, recovery is not just a concept, it is a living, breathing reality in Georgia. Together, we can continue to make a difference. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the well.
Thank you, Senator, and thank you for all the hard work you're doing in that space. It's definitely needed, and we greatly appreciate that. Members, I would just remind you that please be, when you're off to the side conversation, please be respectful of the members who are in the well, and also remind the members in the well that be mindful of the time that you're there as well. So anyways, but I recognize the senator from the 54th for a point of personal privilege.
Thank you, Mr. President. My friends, I know it's been 365 days since the last time I stood here with one of these in my hand, but today is the day. I know the countless sleepless nights have come to an end because today is Dalton Day at the Georgia State Capitol. Just invite you, every one of you, from 4 o'clock to 6 o'clock, Freight Depot, come down, and there, each and every one of you are going to get this year's rug. So what is this year's rug? Are you ready? Is the anticipation building up? There we go. Let's give a drum roll. Welcome to Georgia. Don't. Come on down to the freight depot today. After today, you will have to come to my office to get one, and I might be a little stingy with them. So go down to the freight depot today from 4 to 6. We'd love to have you. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the well.
All right. It's a good day. It's a good day. Oh, is that mine?
Yes.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Thank you. It is Dalton Day. It's always a good day, and y'all should. I would encourage you to go down to the depot and thank everyone for the fine carpets here, but also thank the city of Dalton and the county there of all the good work they do for creating jobs and good opportunities for every individual in the area. So I recognize the senator from the 42nd for a point of personal privilege.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise today on the anniversary of Roe versus Wade, Supreme Court decision that held by a 7-2 majority that protected a woman's right to privacy and reproductive choice. However, 2 years ago, the Supreme Court in the Dobbs decision decided that the Constitution does not guarantee a fundamental right to reproductive freedom, thereby dealing a gut punch to hundreds of millions around the country. So reproductive choice is no longer under the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court. Now each individual state decides how pregnancy will be regulated. And in legislating whether our state will protect reproductive freedom or deny access to choice in health care, we should reflect on several things. One, the will of the people of Georgia, and the full extent of our fundamental rights. Smack in the middle of this debate is a fundamental right not often discussed enough in this context. It's one that Oglethorpe defined in the original charter when founding our great state. Each of us, regardless of religious affiliation or belief, holds it dearly, and that is freedom of religion. The freedom to practice one's religion of choice without government interference is stated clearly in the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. But post-Dobbs, women throughout our state who prioritize a mother's health, physical or mental, over the unborn fetus may be denied their right to religious freedom. For example, Judaism teaches that life is sacred and must be respected and protected. For that reason, when a pregnancy threatens the life of a mother, under Jewish law, she must prioritize her own life. But current law here in Georgia only allows abortions when necessary to protect a woman's life. But it would indeed be against a Jewish woman's religion to force her to suffer through a pregnancy that is substantially likely to take her life, against what our current law can require. Under Jewish law, a mother must also be prioritized when her mental and emotional well-being are at stake. But Georgia's current law says that the emotional and mental suffering a pregnancy may cause cannot be considered by a physician at all. That's wrong. As we've learned, mental health is physical health. Mental and emotional turmoil can cause death, suicide being a leading cause of death, according to the CDC. To force a woman to carry and give birth that would cause immense suffering, if it would cause immense suffering, is immoral and against certain religions' laws. Although I myself am not Jewish, like many of you, I am a parent.
Like some of you, I'm a woman who has brought 2 babies into this world. Giving life and raising children is a selfless act. Having to prioritize my own health and well-being over that of my unborn children would have been a gut-wrenching choice. Many of us in that situation would turn to our religious teachings to guide us. The Constitution guarantees we have that right under freedom of religion. We cannot allow one religious view to define and prescribe reproductive health care. Our law protects each citizen's right to religious freedom. And indeed, that is the nature of freedom. It doesn't just apply to one person or group. We shall not live in a country in which legislators have the right to teach one religion's precepts and teachings as superior to another. In this moment, I urge hearing and thoughtful review of SR 136, a bill that would let Georgians decide the reproductive freedoms for our state constitution. Let's let people of all faiths, not just partisan politics, decide the freedoms that our state grants its citizens. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the well.
Thank you, Senator. Recognize the senator from the 26th for appointed personal privilege.
Thank you, Mr. President. We ought not to get started with this bull. For the senator who talked about Fonnie Willis, I support her. You don't know what the circumstances are. You don't know what a woman's scorn is. The reason there's a case is because somebody did something wrong. And it's recorded. So let's don't bring that here. We are not in Congress. We're not in Washington. Let's take care of Georgia business and do what we need to do.
Thank you, Senator. I recognize the senator from the 36th for appointed personal privilege.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good morning, colleagues. Turning off your phone ringer when you're in the well is a smart thing to do, FYI. I rise today to speak along with other colleagues that you've heard already talk about today being the anniversary of Roe versus Wade, the historic landmark Supreme Court decision that put in place reproductive choice for women. A policy that has been with us for 50 years until some new justices got up on that Supreme Court and threw out 50 years of judicial finding and put women back in a secondary position, unable to freely make choices that worked for them, their families, between the family, their faith leader, and their conscience, and their economic conditions as well. This is the anniversary of that historic ruling by the Supreme Court. Laws have consequences. Everything we do down here has consequences. We would be well served to understand in the real world, for real people, what are the consequences of Georgia's current position with a 6-week abortion ban in place. So today on this anniversary, I want to share with you for a few minutes the story, a very personal story of a fellow Georgian, a woman I know, a woman who's spent much of her lifetime in this state, and shares this story. I'll call her Emma, and I share this story because we're seeking to expose the damage that can be done, that is being done, and will be done as long as Georgia keeps this 6-week ban, abortion ban, on our books. It's a sad state of affairs, and one that is really causing a lot of women to rethink what they want to do with their voting power. Emma grew up in an educated, affluent suburb. Her parents were well-known members of the community, but nobody knew what was going on at home behind closed doors, where Emma, as a child and a young teen, saw her father repeatedly abuse her mother emotionally, mentally, and physically. It was commonplace behind closed doors. She grew up in that atmosphere where this secret was hidden from the world, and she actually believed that this kind of relationship was normal. It's the household she grew up in. And you know, she found herself in a relationship as a young adult with a man of very similar intentions, abusive, controlling. And only this abuse was even more physical than she had seen in her own home, and she began to understand that this wasn't okay. She began to put together the resolve to leave the situation. And we all know domestic violence is never okay, and victims often believe it's their own fault. That's what they're told by their abuser. They bring it on themselves. They deserve to feel the shame and the pain and to be treated in this manner. But Emma decided she'd had enough. She escaped. In April 2021, she ran as far away as possible. But the very next week, she realized she had an early pregnancy. And she lived somewhere else where she could get an abortion, and she did, and severed her ties to that man forever. Understand that when we force a woman who is pregnant to keep a pregnancy that is not in the interests, particularly if she's in a physically abusive relationship, we are forcing her into a lifetime relationship with an abuser. Our sexual violence exception does not address that. It's window dressing, actually. And generations of domestic abuse result in generations of women believing that they cannot get out of it. That's why we have worked to invest in battered women's shelters and a whole movement to free women from these bonds. Our law on abortion that blocks choices to 6 weeks after pregnancy is not workable. It's window dressing. It's useless because I've had 2 children myself. You don't know at 6 weeks that you're even pregnant in many, many cases. So I'm asking you, like my colleagues, to support SR 136 on this issue. Let's see what Georgians think. Let's see what Georgia's women think. Let's see what Georgia families think. Pass SR 126, and we'll have a real chance to get public opinion on Georgia's 6-week abortion ban. Thank you for your attention, and I'll yield the well, Mr. President, if there are no questions.
There are no questions, Senator. Thank you for that. Senator from the 37th, I recognize Senator from the 37th for a point of personal privilege.
Thank you, Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, and Georgians who are watching us today. Come today with somewhat of a heavy heart, listening to some of the debate on this floor. But weighty issues bring to our mind clear thinking. And as I've been thinking about the discussion today about this, the scourge that Roe versus Wade brought into our nation in 1973, I think through that window right there. As I look through those windows, I see a public hospital that on March 18th, 1970, a 20-year-old mother college student who went to college right here in Atlanta brought me into this world. I was born to a single 20-year-old mother before abortion was broadly legal in this country. And because she had no plans to raise me with my birth father, showed grace and laid me into the hands of a 27-year-old pastor and his wife who for years and years had cried themselves to sleep at night because they couldn't have kids, unable to have children. Laid in their hands in adoption. The beauty of that picture, the beauty of adoption as a gift, is something that so many Georgians today cannot enjoy. They go to Belarus, they go to Russia, they go to China, they go all around the world to try to find babies somewhere they can adopt a child that they can raise as their own and give love to. Because since the 22nd of January 1973, there have been 62 million helpless, themselves innocent, living distinct human lives that have been torn apart and lost in the scourge of abortion. For every 4 Americans, 1, 2, 3, or 4, you see the fingers on my hand, for every 4 Americans that have been conceived since 1973, one of those four have perished in the womb through legalized abortion. 1 of 4. So for every Georgian we have in our communities, for every 3 Georgians that are alive, there's one that's missing because of the scourge of legalized abortion. How did that come to our country? It wasn't imposed through politics, it slipped in. Do you know where abortion came from, friends? Abortion was illegal throughout our history. Abortion was unlawful in every state, and it started to slip in the 1920s and 30s. It was no accident. It wasn't brought in by any church. It wasn't brought in by any faith. It was brought in by a group led by Margaret Sanger, who organized something called the Negro Project. And the Negro Project pushed Margaret Sanger and her supporters recognized this. They were trying to push a population control agenda on America. They were virulently racist. It was disgusting. And they reasoned this, and this is published. They reasoned that the Northeast liberals could never convince black Americans that abortion was good for them. Their goal was if they can convince the pastors, if they could convince black pastors that abortion was good for the economic opportunities for their congregations and their people, then they could slide in and sell abortion to the minority communities in our nation. The cynicism of Jim Crow racism is what brought abortion to our nation. And the sad reality of that, the sad legacy of that, is that abortion clinics have been disproportionately located in our minority communities, and the percentages targeted by our liberal elites in our country have focused on minimizing our minority populations over these last 62 years. Mr. President, this is no unweighty matter. It's a matter that when we see 62 million helpless, living, distinct persons who've perished, we recognize it's not religion or Sunday school that cries out. It's science, law, and common sense. Friends, if we had a TV screen up here, and I had a baby that was 8, 9, 10 weeks along inside their mother's belly, and I showed a 4D ultrasound to a group of kindergartners. You ask the kindergartners, what are you guys looking at here? Those kindergartners look at that screen, they say, that's a baby. Baby has a heartbeat. Their gender's already decided. Their DNA is already set. All they need is a safe place to live and nutrition. and they'll live to a ripe old age. Roe versus Wade was imposed on us by a 7-2 opinion of the United States Supreme Court. If we think the rulings of the Supreme Court by an overwhelming 7-2 opinion on this issue of personhood and who has rights is always right, I would ask you, what did that same United States Supreme Court, in the same room, by the same 7-2 opinion, decide just 116 short years earlier? Well, there's a personhood question that had been before the court. And in 1856, the United States Supreme Court, by a 7-2 overwhelming majority, said that Dred Scott's not a person, he's property. And his life's not worthy of full legal protections. That same court, by that same 7-2 opinion, got it wrong in 1856, and it got it wrong in 1973. And Mr. President, as I yield the well, I want us to think about the weightiness of our times in this discussion. We're not preaching religion here. We're teaching science, solid law, and common sense. And all three of those things inform us. We recognize the difficult circumstances women find themselves in. But as we weigh that with the basic right to life of a child, I stand with the least among us, the helpless child that needs this legislature to protect them. And I'm proud that this legislature has. Yield the well.
Thank you, Senator. Remind the members, I haven't said anything to the ones who have gone over, but there's been a couple of three of y'all who have gone over. So just don't make me have to just stop you in the middle of your speech. So I recognize the Senator of the 10th for a point of personal privilege.
Mr. President and members of this body, I rise on this joyous occasion to recognize the Divine Nine. Today has been declared Divine Nine Day, and they are meeting downstairs, and there's probably a few upstairs, but I wanted to make sure that I explain to everyone in this chamber about the Divine Nine. And yes, I'm going to ask if I can be joined by some of my colleagues who's over here to my right, that are members of the Divine Nine. And I'm glad you asked me the question, well, who are the Divine Nine? Let me tell you the Divine Nine are. The Divine Nine was created in the early 19th century as a social Greek organization known as sororities and fraternities. They began forming on college campuses across the United States to provide a sense of community and unique opportunities for students. These organizations were often highly exclusive and barred membership to students of certain genders or races, specifically black students. So at the start of the 20th century, a small number of black students came together from many historically black colleges and universities, as we know today as HBCUs, to form their own sororities and fraternities. These organizations are known collectively as the National Panhellenic Council, or as we call them, the Divine Nine. Each of these organizations were established with unique core values, but shared a common goal to educate and uplift the black community from racial inequalities and disparities. The Divine Nine are Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity, founded in 1906, Cornell University. And if there's any members of these organizations, please stand as I list your sorority or fraternity. Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority, founded in 1908, Howard University. Kappa Alpha Psi fraternity, founded in 1911, Indiana University, of which I'm a proud member. Omega Psi Phi fraternity, founded, and I know I whip yours as well, founded 1911, Howard University. Delta Sigma Theta sorority, founded 1913, Howard University. Phi Beta Sigma fraternity, founded 1914, Howard University. Zeta Phi Beta sorority, founded 1920, Howard University. Thank you to our senator over here. Sigma Gamma Rho sorority, founded 1922, Butler University. Senator Jackson. Iota Phi Theta fraternity, founded 1963, Morgan State University. The Divine Nine, as you can see, has played a tremendous contribution to American history. On today, we celebrate and recognize the Divine Nine. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Recognize the senator from the 5th for a point of personal privilege.
Thank you, Mr. President. I speak today as the senator representing Georgia's most diverse district. That's the distinction I wear as a badge of honor. As the former president of the United States, Georgia's own Jimmy Carter once said, we have become a beautiful mosaic, different people, different beliefs, different yearning, different hopes, different dreams. As being one who represents this extraordinary district, I understand that I am not obligated to respect and to have compassion for their honorable and sincerely held beliefs, even they are not my own. It is not for me to judge, and it's not my job to impose my personal belief or interest upon my constituents. My job is to protect their rights and freedoms and to ensure that the Senate respect their views on important issues. We have not protected and respected their rights to reproductive freedom. In fact, we have failed them, and they are not happy. The anger isn't just in my district. Polling over the past year shows most Georgians do not support our current abortion law. Georgians do not want this law. Georgians want more reproductive freedoms, less government interference, and the right to make decisions with their doctors. It is our duty to allow the people to make this decision for themselves by passing Senate Resolution 136. Like many immigrants to this country, I deeply value the rights and freedoms in our country and state. And in Georgia, we have always strongly protected the right to privacy. We have fiercely guarded the rights of families to determine what the best for themselves in the privacy of their own home, without politicians interfering in their lives. I'll not be quiet. We endanger these rights and freedom, and I'll not allow the Senate to deprive my constituents or Georgians across the state of the freedom to live their lives according to what they believe is right. And that's exactly what our current abortion law does. We must honor and respect the citizens of Georgia. We must honor and respect our state's long tradition and allow Georgians to decide for themselves what is best for them and for their families. Let's pass SR 36 and let the people decide this issue. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the word.
Thank you, Senator. I recognize the senator from the 12th for a point of personal privilege.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I promise to be extremely brief. To my colleagues, please do not use blacks as a scapegoat for your ideology or your relationship with females. We are tired. I've said it 1,000 times. Black women are not the ones that are aborting their babies only, and most times it's very difficult to talk them into having abortions. And if you don't live in the neighborhood, if you don't understand black families and the relationships that we have, then please don't try to use rhetoric that is not going to work. Thank you for listening, and please be careful how you use other groups to define your ideology. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the will.
Thank you, Senator. I recognize the senator from the 47th for a point of personal privilege.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll be brief. One of the things that little levity would help us, but I also want to make sure I point out that, I heard something totally unfactual earlier today. I heard the president of this body refer to himself as not a really stellar athlete. And I thought to myself, I said, holy crap, you don't get to the University of Georgia and play at the University of Georgia football team without being a stellar athlete. That just doesn't happen. So, Mr. President, I want to correct you on that one. But most importantly, I want to recognize a group from back home. I've got the Jackson County Leadership Group here, a great group of 24 high school students. And if they would, I'd like them to stand up, and let's give them a round of applause and a welcome to our Senate body. We do a lot of important things here and some not so important, but I don't think there's anything that's more important than recognizing our future leaders and our youth. And I thank y'all so much for coming and being with me.
Thank you, Senator. I didn't hear all of what you first said, but I caught a little glimpse of it. And my job up here is to speak the truth at all times. So when I said I wasn't very good, I meant it. At any rate, all right, does anyone else want to have a point of personal privilege? I think we got about everybody covered today. Recognize the senator from the 45th.
Mr. President, I move that SB 333 be withdrawn from local consent calendar and committed to state and local government general.
Secretary, read the caption.
Senate Bill 333, a bill by Senator Dixon of the 45th and others. A bill to be entitled an act to incorporate the city of Mulberry, to provide a charter, to provide for legislative findings, and for other purposes. That completes the order, Mr. President.
Senators ask that Senate Bill 333 be withdrawn from state and local government and moved to state and local government general. Is that correct? Okay. All right. Is there objection to that? Without objection, it is granted. We've got a couple of resolutions that have come over from the House here. I'm going to should be pretty simple, but let the Secretary read them. Caption.
House Resolution 805 by Representative Estration of the 104th. Be it resolved by the General Assembly of Georgia that the Honorable Chief Justice of the Supreme Court is hereby invited to address a joint session of the House of Representatives and the Senate at 11 a.m. Wednesday, February 7, 2024, in the hall of the House of Representatives. That completes the order, Mr. President.
Recognize the majority leader speak to the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning. Another lawyer bill here we need to talk about. Looks like the House has invited us back for another visit. So we'll be going over to the House chamber next Wednesday at 11 a.m. to hear an important message from the Supreme Court Justice of Georgia and all the other justices and the District Appeals Justice as well. So we'll see you there. We'll line up here in the Senate chamber like we did 2 weeks ago for the State of the State address, and we'll march over to the House chamber and we'll listen to all the good information that they'll be bringing to us on that day. Mr. President, I'll yield the will.
Thank you, Leader. Is there objection to the adoption of the resolution? Chair hears none. The resolution is adopted. Secretary, read the captions of the next resolution, please.
House Resolution 806, a resolution by Representative Estration of the 104th. A resolution to call for the nomination and election of the chairperson of the State Election Board and for other purposes. That completes the order, Mr. President.
I recognize the Pro Tem to speak to the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, colleagues. This is not a lawyer bill. I know you're happy to hear that on this Monday morning. This is just a joint resolution that calls for the election of the chairperson of the State Election Board. Under the code section, the chair is elected by the General Assembly, and the way this works, there's a nomination and election done from the House that comes over to us for Senate confirmation. The resolution before you simply sets the time and place of that election that you'll see on line 12, which is this Thursday, January 25 at 11 a.m. It's set for the time for the election, and that will be for the House to make that election and then send it to us for confirmation and a confirming vote. Happy to answer any questions. Otherwise, Mr. President, I yield the will.
Sorry about that, Senator. You do
It's
have
okay.
a question. Senator from the 14th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Pro Tem yield.
Yes.
Ms. Pro Tem, I actually think these procedures make perfect sense to me. I would be happy to support them. My only question is, don't these procedures assume that somebody wants that job?
Yes, I think that's outside the purview of this resolution, though, Senator, but I appreciate the question.
Understood. You have my full support today. Thank you,
Great.
Ms. Pro Tem.
Thank you. I don't know if that makes me nervous or not. Thank you, though. I'll yield the will.
Yeah, all right. Thank you, Senator. The question is on the adoption of resolution. All those in favor of the adoption of resolution will vote yea. Opposed, nay. Secretary will unlock the machine. On the adoption of the resolution, the yeas are 51, the nays are 0, and the resolution having received the requisite constitutional majority, therefore is adopted. You have before you a consent calendar of privilege resolutions. Does any senator wish to remove a resolution from the consent calendar? Is there objection to the adoption of the resolution on the consent calendar? Chair hears none. The resolution on the consent calendar is adopted. Moving on to the rules calendar. We have on the docket today House Bill 571. Secretary, read the caption.
House Bill 571 by Representative Silcox of the 53rd and others. A bill to be entitled an act to amend Article 8 of Chapter 6 of Title 49 of the OCGA relating to Alzheimer's and related dementias state plan so as to provide that the Georgia Alzheimer's and Related Dementia State Plan be updated every 4 years to provide for a progress report between updates and further purposes. That completes the order, Mr. President.
Recognize the senator from the 32nd. Speak to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm sure I don't have to tell anybody in this room about the impact of Alzheimer's disease and dementia, which affects so many families in Georgia, including my own. House Bill 571 is an agency bill from the Department of Human Services. It updates the reporting of the Alzheimer's and Related Dementia State Plan, better aligning it with federal law. It changes the state plan reporting required by our state statute from 3 to 4 years. And it also adds a midterm report to the General Assembly and the governor every 2 years so that we'll have up-to-date data and statistics on this rapidly changing problem. This bill passed the House unanimously and is supported by the advocates for Alzheimer's and dementia, and I would ask for your favorable consideration. If there are no questions, I'll yield the well.
You have no questions, Senator.
Thank you.
And thank you for all the good work you're doing in this arena there, Senator. It is a painful, painful disease to watch when you have close ones who are affected by it. So, is any other person wish to speak to the bill? Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? Chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Is there objection to the main question being ordered? Chair hears none. The main question is ordered. The question is on the passage of the bill. All those in favor of the bill vote yea. Opposed, nay. Secretary will unlock the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 51 and nays are 0. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Recognize the senator from the 29th.
Mr. President, I move the Senate recede from its disagreement to the House substitute to SB 159 and agree to the House substitute.
The senators move. Secretary, read the caption.
Senate Bill 159, a bill by Senator Robertson of the 29th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Article 1 of Chapter 5 of Title 42 of the OCGA relating to general provisions regarding correctional institutions of states and counties, so as to prohibit wireless communications and standalone electronic devices behind guard lines and for other purposes. The House offers the following substitute to Senate Bill 159. A bill to be entitled an act to amend Article 1 of Chapter 5 of Title 42 of the OCGA relating to general provisions regarding correctional institutions of state and counties, so as to revise punishment provisions relative to prohibited items in possession by inmates and for other purposes. That completes the order, Mr. President.
The senator from the 29th has moved the Senate recede from its disagreement to the House substitute to SB 159 and agree to the House substitute. You'd like to speak to this, I'm sure, right, Senator? I recognize the senator from the 29th to speak to the measure.
Good morning, friends and colleagues. I'm sure many of you will remember this piece of legislation. It's in your notebook, pink page, LC 393898, S is in Sierra. This legislation dealt with crossing the guard lines of correctional institutions with contraband, primarily focusing on that of the behavior, the illegal behavior of employees and contractors in these institutions. You would have to be sleeping under a rock in another country not to realize and not to understand the absolute danger that exists in the Georgia State Department of Corrections today. Every community has suffered tragedies with the assault and murder of correctional officers and prisoners, detainees and citizens being held inside of our facilities. And a lot of this is facilitated by support from outside. A lot of that outside support comes from corrupt correctional officers, corrupt contractors, and others who have access to sensitive parts of our prisons and jails here in the state of Georgia. During our debate last year, we had some concerns with the word mandatory. Working with our friends over in the House, we have stricken that word from the legislation, so there is not a mandatory minimum in there. The judges are given the opportunity to split sentences and do the things that they do under their discretion. I don't think I have to rehash the hits that have been placed on innocent citizens from inside of prisons. I don't have to repeat the story in the AJC last week where an individual made $11 million by running an illegal operation while inside Georgia Department of Corrections facility. I don't have to talk about the trial that's currently ongoing that has brought attention to the corruption, danger, and violence that occurs inside of our prisons. Even during that trial, individuals that are sworn to uphold the law have violated the law and had to be arrested. If we want to get serious, if we want to get real serious about keeping our prisons safe, keeping our jails safe, not only for the men and women that work there, but for the men and women who are Georgia citizens who have a right to a safe environment to live in and serve out their sentence or await due process, then this is the type of legislation that will help push that forward. And with that, Mr. President, I'll yield for any questions.
You do have a question, Senator.
Yes, sir.
I recognize the senator from the second for a question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator, do you yield?
I do yield, sir.
I know this is a shocker, but I'm going to support the legislation today because you took out the mandatory. But I do have a question, and my question is, Senator, when we look at the warden or superintendents in this legislation to have the ability to give discretion, how is that discretion policed when sometimes they're part of the very criminal enterprise that is plaguing many of our prisons in this state?
I think under the new commissioner that we have in Georgia Department of Corrections, I think we've seen a change on policy and procedure. There's been serious talk about the management in the upper part of our prison system, because I think you and I both agree, if we see a behavior down the chain, then there's a reason that behavior is being allowed, and that's usually a reflection of leadership. And I think under our, all of us operate under policies and procedures. We all have Senate rules, we all have caucus rules, we all have Title 16s, Title 40s, and when individuals step outside the line, we will never create the perfect policy that no one will ever step outside the line. But by making these lines as bright and as clear as possible, I think we go a long way in preventing bad behavior, and I think this does that. And I do want to say this from my heart to the senator from the second, I do appreciate your support on this legislation. If there are no further questions.
You have no,
yes,
no
sir.
more further questions, Senator. You can yield the will. You have no further questions. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the will.
I recognize the senator from the 14th to speak to the bill. I thought we were going to get everybody on board today. Second and 14th. He might be coming to support it.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ooh, I'll tell you, I never feel further from Interstate 16 than when I take a different position than the senator from the second on a bill. Typically,
when I'm in groups that mostly have the same composition, and I try to be aggravating, it's without respect to party. So, here, if I'm aggravating, it's primarily the majority. When I go to dinner, like I did the other night with a bunch of Democrats, I try to be aggravating to them, so I have to use your talking points to do that. But I was with a bunch of liberals, and we were enjoying a nice dinner. I was. And I said something nice about a Republican, and everybody's head went, huh? And the reason was, we were at Bold Monk Brewery, check it out, great spot, shout out in town, and we were upstairs. And that was the second time I'd ever been to Bold Monk Brewery. And I was remarking to this table of liberals that the first time I'd ever been to Bold Monk Brewery, I was at an event sponsored by none other than Representative Buzz Brockway. You may recall him. He has worked a lot since leaving the House on reentry. And he's part of an organization called Georgia Center for Opportunity that works with people leaving correctional facilities to help facilitate their reentry into society. I'm going to read you their mission statement real quick. I promise this is relevant. Removing barriers to ensure that every person, no matter their race, past mistakes, or the circumstances of their birth, has access to a quality education, fulfilling work, and a healthy family life. That is how he punctuates the end of that statement, a healthy family life. Now I want to keep that right here for 1 second. I oppose the bill, but I want to start with the principles that the Senator from the 29th and I share. And again, to use the word shocking, you may not expect me to say these exact words, so I'm going to go ahead and say them. We should all agree that gang activity and free flows of contraband are the single biggest threat to public safety inside the walls of the Georgia Department of Corrections. I'll say it one more time. Gang activity and contraband are the single biggest threat to public safety, the open wound that everybody's dealing with, because these problems compound themselves, right? They're like a spiral. If cell phones, illegal drugs, weapons find their way inside the prisons, these are tools that gangs can use to keep their hold on power and create more of the same problems. It just spirals out of control, and then you get the headlines like what we've been seeing. So I think, and this is my opinion, that every Democrat and Republican should agree that that is the single biggest open wound that we are dealing with behind the walls in GDC. We also, as we know, have an issue with correctional staff in the past, or the last 5 years, the number's about 250, who have been caught bringing contraband inside the walls. But let's talk about, and the Commissioner of Corrections, who has done a lot for transparency for that organization, Commissioner Oliver, let's talk about the 1,500 people who were caught during the same time who were civilians outside the walls. 6 times the number of people, civilians, who were caught bringing contraband inside the walls as correctional officers. So we got a problem on both sides of the wall. Now, we already have a penalty if you bring stuff in that's 2 to 10. Judge has discretion to go up to 10 years for the offense we're talking about. That already exists. So think about what this bill does. The only thing this bill does is take the ability of judges away to give a sentence that's lower if that's appropriate. I want to sing the praises of GDC for 1 second in this very specific regard. They are laser focused on this contraband issue and on figuring out how to stop contraband from getting inside the walls. Let me ask y'all a question. Have y'all read any coverage on how contraband gets inside the walls? Have y'all seen the problem? So there's been some newspaper reporting on Hot Pockets, right? Putting a cell phone inside Hot Pockets. But 14,000 cell phones in 1 year don't get inside GDC exclusively through Hot Pockets. Where do they come through? Drones, right? Big drones. Drones as big as a couch. I have seen the pictures myself, and if you go ask the Commissioner of Corrections, he'll show you. The pictures of the drones that bring cell phones, drugs, anything you could imagine, right, inside the walls of these prisons, sometimes hundreds at a time. Now, you might think, well, that's probably already illegal. It sure is, but it still happens. And not only does it still happen, the technology that the people outside the walls are using to evade capture is already so sophisticated. We've got technology where we can track where drones are, but not only where the drones are, where their operators are, based on the remote controls they're using to control the drones. But guess what the drone operators do? They do it like a crock pot, set and forget. So they go to the place where they operate the drone, they drop the thing, and run off. But that's still dangerous, and it's so dangerous for them in terms of capture that they get paid tens of thousands of dollars by gangs to operate these drones to get stuff inside the walls. So we are talking about extremely sophisticated and tight-knit networks of people who are moving big money, lots of contraband at once, from one side of the walls to the other. That's the policy problem. Why do we have a vacuum of security inside the walls and where these drone operators are operating? I would submit to you this morning, still morning, that it is not because our penalties on this conduct are not high enough. And it's what I just said, they're already high enough. The judge has discretion to use a 10-year sentence if they want, but they haven't been necessarily in every case, and so I guess we're taking that discretion away. In fact, we don't even know if they've been using that discretion or not. We're just passing a bill to take discretion away. But I want to return briefly to the point about what Representative Brockway was doing and how we think about people inside the walls. Nobody is acting like the people inside the walls are angels. And I understand, Senator from the 12th, we are never going to make it a Ritz-Carlton inside those walls, I guarantee you. But we have to think about the fact that these people are coming back. They will leave prison at some point. They will reenter society. Unless your policy solution is just to make automatic life sentences, death penalty on everything, you will be seeing these folks again. And what Representative Brockway and a lot of other well-meaning people on both sides of the aisle realize is they've got to be ready. And that means a lot of things. It means technical certifications, work programs inside the walls like we already have, but it also means access to family, emotional supports. It means they need to be able to talk to the outside world. So let me submit something else to you. One of the reasons why we're having such a problem developing the bipartisan consensus we need on how to deal with cell phones is because the same cell phone can be used to FaceTime with an infant child as to coordinate a murder outside the walls. So when you say, let's just take away all cell phones, well, sure, that's one part of the contraband issue. But what are we going to do about the fact that we've got tens of thousands of people who are eventually going to come back to our general society who are taking away some of the most well-connected access they have to their families? Faces, being able to see, talk to, say I love you, say goodnight to their family members. Some of these people have done totally horrific things that would make my stomach curdle to think about, but they still have family, and they still have to talk to them to maintain the baseline emotional health that they need to be functioning members of society when they leave. Georgia Center for Opportunity, healthy family life. What I think we need, and I think this is way bigger than any policy problem, it's way bigger than any administration, is as a society, we need to ask ourselves if these prisons are just a place where people are out of sight, out of mind. Whether we're scared of them so we throw them away and we don't think about what's happening to them. Because if we do that, what I submit to you is that we get exactly the circumstances that are motivating this bill. We get people who are left in a vacuum of security who are not historically funding enough, although I give great props to Chairman Appropriations. Is it a 4% increase plus $3,000 on top for many state employees in GDC? We are working aggressively now to try to resolve this problem that's been accumulating. But if you talk to Commissioner Corrections, he'll tell you it's not just the salary, it's also that we're having a hard time recruiting people to the profession in GDC because they don't see prestige and dignity in the profession, let alone that they could get stabbed in the back walking through a hallway. I mean, let's put that to the side. They don't want to be associated with something that's getting covered by the news as, corrupt, whatever, this narrative we keep reinforcing about corrupt officers. They want to be respected. They want to feel like, a police officer is respected by a community. So there's a cultural shift that needs to happen, and what I submit to you, and this is the part where maybe I don't get everybody, is I think the more you focus on the well-being of the people inside, the more that you think about serving not just the people inside because you've got to take care of their basic needs because they're trapped, but also serving the wider community by preparing these people to come back in, the more that the mission becomes a service-oriented mission that's about human wellness more than it is about punishment. Now that's a mindset, and that's not just people in this room or the administration, that's society, that's everybody. But we have a role to play in that feedback loop where we don't reinforce the impressions on the nightly news in this chamber that these people are throwaway people. That's up to us in part. If we can lead on the mindset that the purpose of these facilities is temporary safety to the public while we make sure people are ready to go back in and we focus on their basic human needs when we do that, That's when policy starts to move. That's when you get Democrats and Republicans saying together, let's jam cell phone signals. Let's go to the federal government. Let's tell John Ossoff and Raphael Warnock and our congressional delegation that we would like to tell the FCC that we need cell phone jamming inside these facilities. But the flip of that, the basic human need, is that we have to have free access to phone calls to family. Now that's monitored access, because that's these phones by these vendors that we can monitor, and we know if activity is happening that we don't like. But we have to think about both sides of the problem, the human needs and the public safety need that's pressing. And if we said that with one voice, that that was the goal, and we need our federal delegation's help, we could start making the changes in the short run that we need for these facilities to be locked down, secure, and not coordinating gang activity that causes problems on the outside. Now that's one of those bipartisan messages where you're losing people on both sides and your base is not happy necessarily with everything you're saying. But that's a functional solution. So this bill is not about jamming. This bill is not going to solve all our ills. This is just a penalty for contraband. But what I submit to you is not only is this bill worthy of opposition because it takes away judicial discretion and forces maybe some very long probation sentences if they don't want a custodial 10 years. Because if it's 10 years, you got to decide, is it all probation, all custodial? So either you're throwing them away for 10 years or you're doing 10 years of probation, which our commissioner of community supervision has said anything past 2 years, 3 years doesn't solve the policy problem, and our chairman of judiciary led on terminating probation early because of that. So it takes away judicial discretion, but the bigger issue is that this bill reinforces our collective mindset, our attitude, that the way to solve public safety problems is just to throw people on the other side of the wall. But folks, when we're sending couch-sized drones, y'all ever played Red Rover as a kid? You stand in a line on one side, the other side stands in a line on the other side, you hold hands, you say, Red Rover, send whoever right over, and then they just come over and join your side. That's all this sentence does. You got people operating drones outside the walls who are gonna go just play for the inside the walls team for 10 more years. And in the meantime, we will not have done anything to solve the actual policy problem. I'm grateful for your attention this morning, and I'm happy to talk about this ad nauseum anytime y'all want in the hallways. Mr. President, I yield the well.
The senator has yielded. I recognize the senator from second. You're good? Okay. Does any other senator wish to speak for or against the bill? Chair hears none. Is there objection? Would you like to close, Senator? Senator from 29 closes debate.
I appreciate the comments. I don't know that I've ever heard anything so serious referred to as games of Red Rover, but not just phones are brought in by drones, but other things are brought in by drones, much, much more dangerous. And it's usually coordinated through officials, employees of the institution. The senator from the 32nd was able to work on legislation and get it passed several years ago to address the drone issue. And in the process of that, we were able to talk to the FAA about cell phone jammers and all the other stuff. The problem you have with the jammers is most of our prisons are located near residential areas, near highways and other places, and these jammers aren't precise enough just to narrow down into that one little spot. And so a lot of people living in neighborhoods around there, their cell phone service is impacted. People driving up and down I-16, their cell phone service is confusing and jammed. And plus the emergency plans within the prisons and within the correctional facilities that the employees lean in to keep them safe, a lot of times rest on communication via cell phone. So we run into some issues there. No one in this room disagrees that correctional officers have a tough time because, unlike my colleague, I've actually worked in the field and been inside of a lot of our prisons, spent a lot of time in Jackson in the diagnostic, taking people there, having them evaluated, moving them around, and it's a standard problem. Once DOC raises a standard, which I think under Commissioner Oliver they will, then you will find a higher quality employee. And that respect comes there. My friends in the back of the room wearing a powder blue shirt will tell you that having high standards is the beginning of getting respect. How you wear the uniform, how you present yourself, how healthy you are. But I will tell you this. Somebody asked me a question one time about a correctional officer giving a detainee some tobacco and how bad it is. I said, here's the problem with that. He gives him tobacco, then that detainee owns that officer from that day forward. Because 2 days later, he's going to ask for something else. And that officer realizes that he is owned. And then he's going to ask for something else, and then he's going to ask for something else. And it won't be tobacco every day. It'll be a pair of shoes one day. It'll be a knife one day. It'll be a cell phone one day. It'll be something worse another day. He'll ask that officer to do something outside of that institution for him, as has been done. And we've seen pictures of the dead bodies of the female former correctional officer who was assassinated down in South Georgia. We saw the prison in South Georgia that was taken over and the correctional officer lost his eye trying to do his job. Correctional officers should be held to a higher standard. They should be held to the same standard that I was held to. They should be held to the same standard that every trooper, capital officer, GBI agent, and every other post-certified law enforcement officer in the state of Georgia is held to. And it's not the regular standard. It's much higher. I appreciate your time. I ask that you please support this legislation. And with that, Mr. President, I yield the well.
Recognize, wave it off, okay. Does any other senator wish to speak for or against the measure? Chair hears none, and the main question is ordered. Is there objection to the main question being ordered? Chair hears none, and the main question orders. All those in favor of the motion will vote yea. All those opposed, nay. Secretary will unlock the machine. Senator from the 14th, what purpose do you rise?
Parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
Mr. President, is it not true that despite the senator's comments just now, Commissioner Oliver is very clear about his support for advocacy for jamming at the federal level? Is that not true?
The senator speaks what he knows. Recognize a senator from the second. For what purpose do you rise?
Parliamentary inquiry, Mr. President.
State your inquiry.
Mr. President, is it not true by me voting yes on this legislation that we can find a compromise with members in my own party? We may not always agree, but we'll agree to disagree, and that the majority party could take a lesson in that?
I think any time you have bipartisan support on anything, Senator, it's a good day. On the passage of the motion, the yeas are 43 and the nays are 7, and the motion has prevailed. I recognize the majority leader for motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. Day 6 has come to an end. I move that the Senate stand adjourned until 10 a.m. Tuesday, January the 23rd.
The majority leader has moved that the Senate stand adjourned today and reconvene on Tuesday, January 21st. Secretary, read the announcements.
The Rules Committee will meet immediately upon adjournment in 4:50. The Transportation Committee will meet at 1 p.m. in Mez 1. The Government Oversight Committee will meet at 2 p.m. in 307 of the CLOB. The Health and Human Services Committee will meet at 2 p.m. in 450. The Finance Committee will meet at 3 p.m. in Mez 1. The Judiciary Committee will meet at 4 p.m. in room 307 of the CLOB. And the Agriculture and Consumer Affairs Committee has been canceled. That completes the order, Mr. President.
I recognize the senator from the 32nd for an announcement.
Thank you, Mr. President. You've got a flyer on your desk. Tomorrow is Japan Day, at the Capitol. So you'll see a lot of Japanese companies bringing their stuff to show you all when you arrive in the morning. So they'll be out in the street between here and the CLOB. So I hope that you all will stop by and welcome our Japanese companies. Thank you. I yield the well.
Thank you, Senator. Any other senator have an announcement they'd like to make? All right, the majority leader has moved that the Senate stand adjourned until January 21st, 23rd at 10 a.m. All those in favor of the motion will signify by saying aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes clearly have it. We're adjourned.